Hi, how you doing? Can you really successfully grow cantaloupe, honeydew melon, butternut squash, and watermelon in a cold growing zone? I'm here to say yes, you definitely can. It takes a little bit of extra effort sometimes, but with the right technique, it's definitely possible. This season, Andy and I have already feasted on ripe melons, and the butternut squash are well on their way. If you've ever struggled with these heat-loving crops in a cold climate, stick around and I will show you exactly what I do to make this a possibility. My name is Sharon. I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. It's a cool day today, and it's probably a perfect day to be talking about what I'm going to talk about, and that is success at growing cantaloupe, honeydew melon, watermelon, can be included in that, and butternut squashes or winter squashes. The very first thing that you have to consider is choosing the right variety. If you live in a short or cold growing zone, you need to think about this first and foremost to have proper success growing these heat-loving vegetables and fruit, I suppose, the melon. So for the honeydews, I grow the Diplomat hybrid. These are honeydews right here. And they have a short growing season. They mature in 64 days. I bought the seed from William Dam Seeds, but they're available other places as well. West Coast Seeds has them, and West Coast Seeds has a great description for the variety, and I'm just going to read that to you. It says, "What a wonderful flavor. The thick, pale green flesh of this Gallia-type melon has a rich tropical aroma and taste. Diplomat is tolerant to powdery mildew as well. The 2.2 to 2.8 kilo or 5 to 6 pound fruit have yellow skins and fine netting, and they grow on strong vines. Trellis the vines or let them sprawl on the ground, grow in full sun, and do everything you can to increase the heat around these plants." And, I think that is pretty much key for growing melons, either the honeydew, the cantaloupe, or the watermelon. We've already harvested 4 of the honeydew melons. The first one wasn't quite ripe, but it was still tasty. The second one was, subsequent ones, the second, third, and fourth, they were ripe. It has a flavor that you would not expect. Quite strong, actually, but still very, very tasty. Green flesh inside, very sweet, very tasty, but different than you would expect from a honeydew melon. The flavor, my initial taste of the flavor was quite surprising. I thought, oh, that doesn't taste like a honeydew, but not like a honeydew, like that really gentle, mellow flavor. It's really not like that at all. For the cantaloupe, which are just growing back there, and we'll get a little closer in a while, I grew the Early Champ hybrid. It's EARLICHAMP, and it's a 65-day. These short day varieties, I think that's crucial to growing them, because that doesn't mean from the time you put the seed in the ground you're going to have a melon in 65 days. It doesn't work that way. Those are ideal growing conditions with all the heat and everything. It doesn't take into account cold nights or rainy days, all of that can cool the plant off, delay pollination maybe because of humidity or rain or cold or whatever the case may be. There's all kinds of reasons that pollination can be delayed. I got a bunch of fruit early when they surprised me that they were fruiting quite early after I planted them. And then they took a lull for the longest time before they started to fruit again. Anyways, this seed also came from William Dam, but also available through other areas or through other seed companies. And I found a description from OSC Seeds, that's Ontario Seed Company. And this is what they have to say about them. Has a great tasting, lusciously thick flesh, an intoxicating aroma, and very high Brix or sugar content. excellent disease resistance, and large fruit size averaging 2 to 3 kilos in weight, which again would be 5 or 6 pounds. Now, I can attest to the sweetness. They are supposed to have a 12 to 14% Brix rate, and that's the measure of sweetness. And we have one of those refractometers. I always want to say refractometer, and maybe that's correct too. But so refractometer or refractometer, anyways, one of those things that measures the sweetness. And the one that we cut into and ate, we were going, wow, this is so sweet, and it was so juicy. And it was 14%, which is very high for a sugar content in a fruit. I have never tasted cantaloupe that good, honestly, anywhere. In all of my travels or anywhere I've lived, I've never tasted cantaloupe that good. Very, very good. That will definitely be on my must grow every year list, because we thoroughly enjoyed them. And to have that fruit that early in the season, it's mid-August, and we're already enjoying that fruit probably the last 10 days, I'd say, that since we harvested. So very, very good. Highly recommend the Early Champ variety. And as for the butternut squash, I am growing the Early Butternut Hybrid, which is a 75-day to maturity. And it was an All-American Selection winner in 1979. So it's been around a long time. It's a hybrid seed, so you can't save the seed and expect, you can, but you can't expect the same, performance every year, because it can revert to whatever the parent plant was. It is, they call it a semi-bush variety. And so what happens is, and we'll see them just a little later, it creates this great big bush, 4 by 4, I'm going to say, each plant. And then after that, it begins to vine out. When it first starts to grow and starts to flower, there's lots and lots of male flowers. And then they start to vine, and the female flowers came on the vine, with still lots of flowers being pushed up from the center of the bush, and those were the male flowers. I read a thing once about male flowers and why they come early and first, and that is apparently to attract the bees and to get the bees used to coming to those plants. And then they start to push the female flowers, and the bees are still coming, and they have learned that there's lots of pollen available. Anyways, I don't know if it's true or not. Seems to make sense to me, so I kind of go with that. I seeded all of these indoors on May 1st in 2-inch pots. I didn't want big transplants to go into the garden, and at the same time I also wanted to wait until at least early June before planting them into the garden, to make sure that I was planting them into nice warm soil. In a cold zone, every step you take is going to matter. And warm soil is the key. And some years we get lucky and these steps don't matter as much. But to have consistent success, it's best to pay attention to these details. This year is a prime example. With cooler weather, we've had cooler weather throughout most of the summer, like very few periods of extended heat. And so all of those steps taken earlier just help with success later. It's not what is immediately happening that determines how your plant is going to grow and fruit. It's all of those steps all along the way. A shocking cold can just make them stop fruiting for quite some time. And I don't recall it being cold. When I said that earlier, they had all just taken a break for a little while. Oddly enough, it was kind of when the bees weren't around either. I tend to think that the bees go on vacation for a while. I mentioned that before. I don't know. They go to the beach. I'm not sure. Anyways, the bees do seem to take a break for a while. Part of me thinks that they head over to the canola, and because we're not far from the edge of town, and then there's grain crops. And so when the canola's in bloom, the bees seem to be absent for a little while. That's my thought. So anyways, I think giving them that proper head start is the key, and so starting them indoors is the first step. You have to be careful about. I transplanted the melons and squash all at the same time in June into these raised beds, which also help with the warm soil. I had row cover over top of the raised beds holding in the warmth so that they didn't cool off really quickly. It's surprising how much that row cover really does help to keep the soil warm. And there's a video that I show my technique for transplanting started melons. Butternut, squash, watermelon would be the same. Cucumbers and zucchini would also be the same. All of these are notorious for being difficult to transplant, and they can be. They don't like to have their roots disturbed, so when you take it out of the pot, you can't do anything else with that root ball except gently put it into the soil and gently ferment it in. They dislike root disturbance, and so a gentle hand is really important. It's not impossible. There is certainly, I rarely lose a plant to transplant shock. You just have to pay attention, be careful. Don't go about it really fast or really rough or anything like that. They're like a newborn baby that, everything has to be really nice and gentle and warm and kind for that plant to take hold. And then when I planted them, you can't see it now, but I plant all of these types of plants. Actually, I plant most of my plants into a kind of a depression in the soil, and that is to hold water so that it directs it to the roots of the plant, and so that when I water, which is usually by hand, it doesn't just drain away. It directs that water toward the root ball of the plant, which is where the plant needs it. You don't need water way over there when the root ball is right here. So next, after transplanting, I covered the beds with the hoops and row cover, or frost blanket is another term for it. And this kept them a little bit warmer at night, while the nights were still cool, dipping below 10 C or even warmer. I was still covering them. I covered them also to protect from the wind. That's another important factor, is to protect from the wind. And I get it. A lot of us have gardens that are right out in the open. This is not in the open, but it's surprising how windy it can get, because I don't know, there's wind tunnels or something, and so there's very little that one can do about how strong the wind is going to blow. And so that if you can rig up something to be able to protect your plants, and I've done this with watermelon too, and I did it with the squash. I just covered them, kept them covered until they started blooming, and then I took the covers off during the day, but I put them back on at night. That row cover helped them to settle in, and without the wind whipping across the bare soil, it stops the plant stops the soil from drying out too fast. I touched on watering a little bit, that I hand water, and I hand water most things, especially anything that likes warm soil. I hand water with rainwater if I have it, and if I don't have rainwater, then we fill the rain barrels with water from the hose, and we let that water sit and warm to the outside temperature before it's used. It's more the warmth than it is like that there's chlorine in it or whatever. We have hard water, really hard water. All that doesn't really matter, I think. But I think it does matter that, if you have a plant that likes really warm soil and you're blasting it with cold water all the time, you're cooling off those roots. I think that matters. Anyways, I did keep them well watered with rainwater. That's what these sticks are here for. actually, and that's just so I know where the center of the plant is, so that when I do water, now that it's all covered and I would not otherwise wouldn't know where the center of the plant was, and so I can water into that depression when I need to. We've had rain over the last little while, so I'm not sure if I'm going to need to water these again. It'll be a while before I do need to. That row cover also helped them survive a hailstorm and some really windy, cold days that I just kept it on during the day as well. I didn't bother taking it off. And, you know, that hailstorm, I'm fairly certain my plants would have been shredded, and they would have been set back had I not had them covered. So there's lots of reasons for row cover. I think that row cover, setting up a system where you can use row cover, if you're a cold zone gardener and you want to push the limits a little, or you want to grow things like melons or watermelons or squash, winter squashes in particular. Summer squashes are fairly easy, but winter squashes are not quite as forgiving. Then I think, you know, they're a good investment. Trying to figure out how you can get that done. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a raised bed. You don't even really need to use hoops. Although I find them helpful. You just need, if you use hoops and row cover, you just need to be able to find a way to secure that. A good way in a big vegetable garden to secure that is simply just to put more dirt over the edges of the row cover. I'll use bricks to keep everything held down, and that works quite well for me. You could use lengths of rebar, you could use water, milk jugs filled with water. You could use a variety of things, just something that you can weight it down so it doesn't go blowing in the wind. So once I saw that the plants were up and growing well, I fertilized, and the first thing I fertilized with before they were blooming was Miracle-Gro 24-8-16. That promotes vegetative growth or green growth, or, you know, leaves, and it doesn't really promote the flowering as much. At least it's not supposed to. Once it started flowering, then I switched to Miracle-Gro 15-30-15, and that is supposed to promote the flowering. I've read different things about it. There's different schools of thought that, you know, it really doesn't matter, that it's the ratio that matters more, like the NPK ratio that matters more, and whatever. You know what, this is what works for me. I've found that it works for me, and so I have no reason to change that because somebody else says or thinks that it doesn't works for me. And you know what, whatever works for you, you should continue doing that as well. If it works for you, it's great. But if you're looking for something to boost your plants and get the most that you can in your growing season, this is what I do. I start with 24-8-16, and to promote lots of leaves, because that's important too, not just lots of flowers, lots of leaves are important. And then I switch to the 15-30-15. I don't mess around with banana water or compost tea. And we have a short but really powerful growing season because we do, you know, in good years, we do get the heat. For one thing, we get lots of sunshine. Even with smoky days, we still get, you know, lots of sunshine poking through. And so in that season, we need strong plants to produce as much as they can before the nights start getting cool again. Just speaking of cool nights, last night I think it got to 8 degrees here, or 7, something like that. And tonight it's supposed to go to 5 or 6. So it's the middle of August and we're already starting to feel that little bit of fall in the air, you know. It's supposed to warm up again, who knows, but it is supposed to warm up again. And but in the meantime, I have cold days and nights. Cold days, it's 15 degrees here today. That's our high. And so, you know, this is not an anomaly, this kind of weather. This is pretty normal that we get bouts of this. I'm going to say every year. This June, I was running out to cover the plants because everything was planted out, and suddenly it got so cold that I thought it was going to freeze. And I said to Andy, like, when am I ever going to get a June where I don't have to worry about this? And I don't think it ever will. Same with, I don't know if we'll ever get an August where we don't have to have a night or two where we're thinking about, oh, is it going to freeze tonight? Or is, you know, geez, it's so cold, it can't be good for the plants. So this is our reality in a cold zone garden. So back onto the row cover. I have my row cover just on the other side of the bed there. It's always ready to be put back on again. And I think that after this video is done, after I'm done recording this, that's exactly what I'm going to do, is tuck everything in here for the rest of the day because it's cloudy and cool. So at least it'll gain some heat while the row cover is on during the day, and then it'll help to keep them just a little bit warmer at night. So it's not because I'm expecting frost tonight. It's just to hold that heat just a little bit better during the day. You know, while I'm sitting here, I can actually smell this melon. Like it smells fruity and nice, and so I think that's going to be a good melon. I've never grown cantaloupe or honeydews before, but I do grow watermelon every year. I haven't this year because out of my 8 raised beds for vegetable growing, I only ever devote 1 bed to growing watermelon or melon. And when I do grow watermelon, my variety of choice is Sureness. It's a yellow fleshed watermelon, very high in bricks, very sweet and very juicy. It's really an excellent watermelon, and it's also early maturing. So since I had never grown cantaloupe or watermelon or cantaloupe or honeydew before, I just went ahead and treated it basically the same way as I would growing watermelon. And that worked. I just needed to pay attention to when it's ripe because it's different than watermelon. Watermelon, you look for a dried tendril. That doesn't work. It doesn't work that way for honeydew or cantaloupe. Everything I read said that these melons would just slip from the plant or slip from the vine, and I didn't really understand that until the first one that I harvested that was ready. The first one that I harvested was not ready, and I did clip it from the vine because I thought, oh, this has to be ready. As it turned out, it was not. The second one was ready, and it did come off the vine. Actually, that one started to rip a little bit. No, that was the third one. It started to rip a little bit at the stem end and, kind of open the plant a little. The second one that I harvested, it's true that when you pick up that melon and you just pull it, the stem just detaches itself. So that's how you know it's ready. And I mentioned that I'm sitting here and I can smell this melon. There's another one over there. I was over here checking these just a little earlier, and when you get up close to them, if you're within a foot of them, you can just smell that beautiful, exotic would be a good word to describe it. Just that beautiful melony, floral sort of scent is fresh. It's really nice. It's kind of surprising if you don't know it's going to be there. You'd say, oh, what is that, beautiful scent? But so that's the other way that you know it's going to be ready, and I'm pretty sure this one is going to be ready. The other thing is that you can see here that I've raised them up on bricks, and I've done that for every fruit that is developing here. And the reason I've done that is, for one, to keep them off the wet soil. I mentioned we had a few rains recently, and especially when it's cool and cloudy, that soil stays wet. I've had slugs bore into the watermelon, and I wasn't sure if that would happen with these netted kind of skins. The watermelon has a thicker skin, so even though the slug did bore in a bit, it really didn't cause much damage because of the thickness of the rind. These honeydew and cantaloupe don't have a very thick rind, so I think that if a slug was going to get in there, I think that it would probably do damage a lot quicker. But I just didn't want to take the chance. The other thing, I also didn't want to take the chance of them rotting on the bottom side. And the other thing is that, those bricks store, they heat up and they store just a little bit of heat that certainly couldn't hurt. I don't know if it's going to help, but it certainly couldn't hurt. So here is that melon that I've been putting my hand on the whole time. And, you can just see a tiny little bit of cracking right here at the stem. And so when I lift this melon up, it is just going to come away, and it's going to detach itself from the plant very easily. Sorry, I couldn't do that one-handed, so I had to put the camera down just for a second. But, there's no cutting away required. So this has now, and you can smell that melon even more. The other thing about it is the ripeness is when you press on this end, there is just a little bit of softness right there. Not anywhere else really on the plant. More. Here is the cantaloupe. And I'm not sure that I have any of these ready. This one is still, quite green underneath the netting. This one is starting to turn a little bit lighter in color, perhaps, but I don't think it's anywhere near ready. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 10 more cantaloupe here that are all around this size, actually. I don't think, there's another one there. So that would be probably the smallest one that I have. There's one that escaped on the outside of the bed there. And then there's these 3 over here. And so, this is one of the reasons why I'll be covering the bed or trying to protect this to get these to maturity now. And as for the squash, well, there's a number of them growing very well underneath all those leaves. I've counted 10, maybe 12, full size, and many more in various stages of growth. I've also started trimming the vines. Now I also am pretty sure that any fruit set at this point will not mature in time. And by mature, when I say mature, I mean hard skin that will last the winter in storage. It needs to be a tan color, and trying to jab the skin with your fingernail is impossible. They need to be that hard. And this is the exact reason why you need to choose a short season variety, because butternut squash allowed to fully ripen on the vine will develop the best flavor and have the longest storage life. And if they're unripe, they're going to have a hard texture and a bland taste. It is possible to ripen them off the vine if they're, mature enough. Like if you take a really small green squash, it's probably never going to ripen to the extent that you want to eat it. But so if you want to ripen them off the vine, say you have a bunch that, are looking close, but not quite, but you're getting a hard frost, you can harvest them and then lay them in a warm, sunny spot. Apparently they like, temperatures above 25 degrees, between 25 and 30, with good air circulation and humidity for a couple of weeks for them to actually cure properly. And so I'm just going to show you a few of what I have. So there's a pretty nice size. I'll just put my hand there for reference. There we go. And they're still pushing out the flowers, quite a bit of flowers. This one is, I think, the first one that's set. And so there it is again. Now, This early butternut hybrid does not produce like big, gigantic squashes, you know, that that you eat for days and days. And so the ones that I saw that are pretty, you know, pretty good size, they would all be around this size, and slightly bigger, slightly smaller. There's a number of them this size, which are still quite small, although it's surprising how fast they grow. There's another one that's about between all those sizes. Another even smaller one. Like, I don't think this will amount to anything at this point. There's one with a great big long neck. And just, you know, this turned out really good, growing them, letting the vines grow on the stones. Keeps them nice and dry. A little bit, like if you feel the stones, they actually, you know, absorb some heat. And so this is obviously too big for me to use row cover and tuck everything in, but I do have a pretty big, one big frost blanket that I can put over all of this, and I may do that tonight. And again, that is just to try and trap in a little bit of the heat, just so it doesn't dissipate so quickly, and just try to keep them just a little bit warmer at night. So I'm gonna, I'll put photos of these or some video or something at the end of this, just to show what the inside of it looks like, and I'll also weigh them. This is the smaller one that, you know, had the broken vine. But they both smell equally as good, so I'm sure they're both, you know, peak of ripeness, I'm going to say. I hope you found this interesting, informative in some way, and I hope it, if you've not tried growing cantaloupe or honeydew or butternut squash, I hope that this encourages you in some way to give it a try. Just plan it out. Just think of what you need to do ahead of time, and that would definitely include some way to keep the way it's planted, to keep it a little bit warmer. And like I said before, that's our reality. If you're living and growing in a cold zone area, that is what we have to contend with and what we have to try and overcome. And there is ways of doing it. You know, you just have to think ahead and beat the odds that way. Anyways, I hope you did enjoy the video, and if you did, give me a thumbs up, and while you're down there, hit that share button. Thanks again. See you. Almost 2 kilos.